Treating COVID-19, off-label drug use, compassionate use, and randomized clinical trials during pandemic. Welcome to our video. So in our video, you will be learning all about the issues when it comes to testing for possible treatments, especially during pandemics such as COVID-19 and Ebola. So this is our introduction. The coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic is the defining global health crisis of our time and the greatest challenge we are facing today. We have now reached the tragic milestone of 1 million deaths, and the human family is suffering to a burden of loss. In this outbreak, there are interventions to be conducted in order to flatten the curve. Efforts made by individuals and groups of scientists, such as identifying the amount of disease and to test hypotheses about the risk factors in order to improve the well-being of the people infected. Additionally, the Ebola outbreak in 2014 enables a large number of interventions conducted to the patients. Due to the large number of affected individuals, there were therapeutic interventions that were tested. The goal was to discover the efficacious and finest intervention that could help stop the spread of the outbreak. But there were no new discoveries due to the fact that they used single group interventions without having simultaneous control that led them to inexplicit conclusions. During the Ebola outbreak, the National Institute of Health was the one who conducted only one randomized controlled trial, which took months to design, and it was only used once because it was too late to be completed. Due to the reason that it took months to design these trials and it was already too late, the trial was not completed. This tragedy of not discovering new therapies during an outbreak can also be done in this COVID-19 pandemic. This journal enables us not to repeat what happened in the Ebola outbreak, but rather it will be a guide to know what is the accurate interventions to use and to know what trials are appropriate that can help us find the effective and safe treatment for COVID-19 and to other future outbreaks. Now let's move on to the methodology. So in the journal, the methodology that they used was the randomized controlled trial. What is a randomized controlled trial or RCT? An RCT is a study design that randomly assigns participants into an experimental group or a control group. As the study is conducted, the only expected difference between the two groups is the outcome variable being studied. So in this example, we have a diagram wherein a sample population is divided into two groups. So in the first group, a new treatment is applied, or the first group, the respondents were given new treatment to define the outcome. And in the second group, the control treatment or the placebo, which is a type of treatment that does not necessarily give physiological benefits to the patients, were given. And then the outcome was also defined. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of randomized controlled trial? So for the advantages, we have the following. RCT allows good randomization, which will wash out any population bias. So the bias will be minimized with the use of RCT. Next, it is easier to blind or mask than observational studies. Results can be analyzed with well-known statistical tools. And last, populations of participating individuals are clearly identified. So for the disadvantages, we have the following. It is expensive in terms of time and money. So as mentioned in the introduction a while ago, the finding of treatment for Ebola took a lot of time because the design for the trial for the randomized controlled trial took many months, and by the time it was completed, it was already too late. And then another disadvantage is the volunteer biases, wherein the population that participates may not necessarily be representative of the whole or may not be a part of the population. And then last is the loss to follow-up attributed to treatment. Features of a well-designed RCT. First, sample to be studied will be appropriate to the hypothesis being tested so that any results are appropriately generalizable. Effective randomization of the subjects to the intervention or control groups to eliminate selection bias and minimize confounding variables. Both groups will be treated identically in all respects except for the intervention being tested. The investigator assessing outcome will be blinded to treatment allocation. Analysis focuses on testing the research question that initially led to trial rather than trawling, which is the trapping as many resources as possible to find a significant difference. So here are some important ideas that we think must be emphasized in order to find a treatment during pandemics. So in the study, some patients were given therapies but without controls. So there was no way to find if the treatment was truly effective. Although it had an effect to fight the virus, no clinical evidence currently supports the efficacy and safety of any drug against any coronavirus in humans, including SARS-CoV-2. Without the use of RCT, there is no way to know whether the patients had benefited or were harmed if they were not compared to a concurrent control group. So without the use of a control group, there is no 100% assurance that the treatment was truly effective or truly harmful towards the patient. By participating in an RCT, both patients and clinicians can benefit from the unique opportunity to directly contribute to the discovery of new therapies and also from the safer monitoring process in the conduct of clinical trials compared with uncontrolled drug administration whereby safety cannot be determined. So, the patients and the clinicians both contribute to the discovery of new therapies since the patients are the one testing out the treatment, while the clinicians are the ones who are trying to find treatment for a particular disease. Now let's move on to results, discussion, and conclusion. So for the results, it was found out in the article that administering off-label drug use, compassionate drug use, and studies without control discourage patients and clinicians from participating in randomized controlled trials or RCT, which prevented any knowledge that could be gained about the effects of the drug being tested. Aside from that, it also increases the risk of harming patients without even detecting the magnitude of harm. So, using drugs without labels or drugs without the approval of a certain organization and studies without any control will more likely to cause more harm than good to the patients. So first, let's discuss off-label drug use. Off-label means that the medication is being used in a manner not specified in the FDA's approved packaging label or insert. Off-label use is the use of pharmaceutical drugs for an unapproved indication or in an unapproved age group, dosage, or route of administration. Both prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs can be used in off-label ways, although most studies of off-label use focus on prescription drugs. In this current pandemic, many therapies were used as a treatment. However, none of these treatments were actually approved effective or safe. The use of off-label drugs on patients with severe disease like of COVID-19, may not show effectiveness since it is not compared to an existing control group. The use of drugs for treatment of COVID-19 has not actually been approved officially. However, since social media played a vital role in the sharing of information about possible treatment, a lot of people are starting to um, believe that these treatments are actually effective when in fact they may not be effective nor safe at all. If off-label drug use involves the use of drugs that have been FDA approved, compassionate drug use involves the use of drugs that were not yet FDA approved. Compassionate drugs that have not been approved before have resulted to cause adverse effects to patients but are previously undetected because of the very small number of exposed patients. It would also be impossible to differentiate the drug-related adverse effects from the disease if there are no control groups. The use of intravenous steroids in anti-inflammatory therapy has been associated with delayed coronavirus clearance. Moreover, low-dose steroids have shown harm in patients with sepsis, and IL-6 inhibitors may cause even more profound immunosuppression than steroids, increasing the risk of sepsis, bacterial pneumonia, gastrointestinal perforation, and hepatotoxicity. Last is the uncontrolled studies. Uncontrolled studies, as mentioned a while ago, are studies that do not have any control groups in their studies. Hence, there is no way to know whether these studies are actually beneficial to patients. Controlled groups are the standards of care with or without placebo. Placebo is a type of drug that does not necessarily have any physiological effects on a patient and is more used for control groups. It helps determine accurately the harm of any experimental drug. In reality, the placebo group will always be safer with regards to adverse effect than the experimental group because patients in the placebo group will receive the established standard of care.
Coming out of Britain, a clinical trial for what is considered one of the more promising COVID-19 vaccines. That trial has been placed on hold. This is the Oxford vaccine in concert with AstraZeneca. They have paused the trial because a patient fell ill without explanation. Cindy Palm is on the story with the latest from London. Cindy.
Well, Heather, the World Health Organization has come out to say safety is the primary focus and that pausing a trial is actually pretty routine. Meanwhile, the UK's medical regulator says it is urgently looking at the information and seeing if this trial can restart as quickly as possible because the University of Oxford vaccine that is being developed by the British pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca is seen as one of the more promising candidates in the fight against COVID. There are dozens of clinical trials taking place around the world, including many in the U.S. However, this case in particular involving the participant who fell ill, that is a case out of here, the UK. It is unclear if this person fell ill as a result of this vaccine, which is key. Take a listen to what one medical expert said.
If a serious adverse medical event occurs, we want it investigated. The company immediately put the trial on pause, and an external group will be doing that investigation to try to determine whether this was a coincidental event, would have happened anyway, or might be causally related to the vaccine. We're not even sure that the person received the vaccine, could have received the placebo.
There are several trials going on around the world, but less than 10 that are in this late stage phase 3 human trial process. Heather.
This whole thing really highlights, Cindy, the issue of safety, and that's something that we've been reporting on of late because of concerns coming out of the U.S., notably allegations or suspicions of political pressure, political interference in the whole vaccine approval process. We have had in response really an unprecedented pledge from a number of pharmaceutical companies assuring the public about the safety of whatever vaccine emerges. Tell us more about what they have done.
9 major drug companies, including AstraZeneca, pledged yesterday that they will not try to speed up the government approval process unless they know that their potential vaccine is safe. And this is a way of trying to quell any fears from the public that the process is being expedited. We know that President Trump recently said he believes that a vaccine could be ready by the presidential election on November 3rd, that this is a possibility, which is just a couple of months away. And that is quite optimistic, and more optimistic than what some of his health officials have been saying in the Trump administration. At the same time, though, you have companies, for example, Pfizer, BioNTech, who say that they could be seeking government approval by mid-October or early November. Heather.
Cindy, thank you. Cindy Palm, live from London this morning. You can learn more about the global development for vaccines online. AstraZeneca just one of more than 150 different candidates in various stages of development, and the CBC Vaccine Tracker has all the information you might be interested in, as well as how the individual vaccines work and the pros and cons associated with each of the different types. It's online for you now at cbc.ca/vaccine tracker.
So for our conclusion, only the rapid and simultaneous combination of supportive care and RCTs is the way to find effective and safe treatments for COVID-19 and any other future outbreaks. Compared with uncontrolled drug administration, where safety cannot be determined, randomized controlled trials are safer since they have safer monitoring process in conducting clinical trials. It can also benefit both the patient and clinicians through their direct contribution in the discovery of new therapies for these diseases. And that is all for our video. Thank you so much for watching.